That's what Corey Harrison said when he decided to expose a crime that no one in America dared to think would happen involving his father, Rick Harrison. What he revealed shocked everyone and let them into a hell that no one thought existed behind a TV. It's not a scam or a personal scandal. It's a sophisticated criminal network that goes back more than 20 years and includes hidden underground chambers, bodies being displayed like historical artifacts, and a web of crimes going on right in the middle of Las Vegas, hidden by stage lights, media, attention, and the trust of millions of fans. What makes his son cut ties with his father to reveal the truth? What horrible things could turn a family show into a crime scene? And most importantly, are you ready to hear the whole truth about the fall of a TV legend? Porn Stars, the reality TV show about the gold and silver porn shop in Las Vegas, was more than just a fun show. It was a cultural phenomenon. When it first aired in 2009, the show quickly gained an average audience of over 7 million viewers per episode, making it one of History Channel's most popular shows of the 2010s. People watched not only to see old things being appraised, but also to enjoy the family-friendly atmosphere, a place where the Harrison family argued, bargained, and shared historical information for generations. Rick Harrison was the show's star, with his sharp negotiating skills, knowledge of antiques, and ability to craft compelling stories around each item. He was the epitome of the American dream, a man who, despite not being born into wealth, built an empire through intelligence and hard work. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a storyteller who turned history into a product with emotional value. Rick's image alongside his father, the old man, and his son Corey became a symbol of real family ties and passing on knowledge from one generation to the next. That's why Rick Harrison was given a life sentence without parole for illegally possessing and displaying human remains, along with other serious criminal charges. This wasn't just a personal scandal. It was the end of a brand that had been built on over a decade of community trust. The worst blow didn't come from the courtroom. It came from within the family, where people used to think loyalty and family ties were impossible. In an interview filmed in total darkness and silence, Corey Harrison, Rick's son and on-screen partner for hundreds of episodes, broke his silence. He not only refused to defend his father, but he also called him a pure evil, which left no room for reconciliation. This news changed everyone's memory. Of fans quickly stopped debating the history of an ancient coin and started asking, "How long have we been deceived?" This was because of physical evidence found in Rick's home, storage units, and porn shop, which had been thought to be harmless at first. Corey not only testified as a witness, but he also publicly called himself a living testament, someone who had lived in the shadow of this darkness but lacked the courage to face it until the truth became clear. At that point, the public no longer saw this as just a high-profile case. They saw it as a modern tragedy where the spotlight hid the truth and trust was stolen by people who were once held in the highest regard. And like all tragic stories, it didn't end with the trial. It had just begun. When Rick Harrison's verdict was read in court on a February morning, it was one of the darkest days in the history of American reality TV. All eyes were on one person, Corey Harrison, but he didn't show up in court. He didn't make any public statements. He didn't post anything on social media. He didn't do any interviews on sites where he used to connect with fans. He had completely disappeared. This silence in the middle of a media storm that was tearing through every platform was not only noticeable. It was worrying. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was Corey being silenced? Was he preparing a legal defense to protect himself? Or even worse, was he part of this criminal network? He had stood by his father in hundreds of episodes and was the direct heir to the porn shop. Could he really be innocent? The theories got stronger, and investigative articles were published all the time. Old photos and forgotten scenes from porn stars were looked at frame by frame, and internet sleuths asked, were those times when Corey looked uneasy? Corey stayed quiet during all the noise. 4 days after the trial, he was found living alone in a small hotel in downtown Los Angeles. He had no help, no bodyguards, and no media presence. He wouldn't answer any calls, not even from close friends. Photographers waited outside for hours but could only capture the closed curtain of his room. Corey wasn't hiding, but he didn't want to be found. On the 5th day, the silence ended, but not with a press release or in a phone call. Corey called Elijah Rouses, a freelance documentary director who had worked on early episodes of Porn Stars and was one of the few people she fully trusted. "It's time," Corey said. "I don't want to die with this in my head." When Elijah and Corey met at an air in the Hollywood Hills, there was no crew or lights, just a camera on a tripod, an unopened bottle of whiskey on the table, and a man ready to tell America shocking truths. The first thing Corey talked about wasn't his father, but himself. "I've been silent for too long," he said, his voice avoiding the camera's gaze, "and I know that makes me complicit in the eyes of many. Maybe it does." No tears, no excuses, just a cold admission like peeling back a bandage from a rotting wound. Corey said, "The first time I thought something was wrong was when I was only 16 years old. I was looking through the storeroom for an old baseball card collection after the store closed. I came across a filing cabinet that was locked, but my teenage curiosity overpowered my caution and I broke the lock. Inside were black and white photos of mostly dead bodies lying still with their eyes open and their skin waxy and pale, posing in some of the people in the pictures he recognized. They had been customers at the pawn shop at that very moment. Corey didn't say anything, not because he didn't know who to tell, but because he didn't want to believe what he saw. He locked the cabinet again, as if that would stop the screaming memories from coming back to him. In the years that followed, he noticed more strange things: suitcases being dragged into the back door at midnight, rooms in the shop that were always locked. Even though he was the official, when Corey asked Rick about the fights between his father and strange men dressed like businessmen but acting like spies, Rick would say, "Don't worry about it, son, that's history you're not old enough to understand." Corey started to think it was all crazy talk. His father was weird, yes, but he couldn't be the monster Corey had imagined in his nightmares. But as the years went by, the proof was clear. One time he found a suitcase in his dad's car full of pictures. There were pictures of bodies with handwritten descriptions, like they were part of a historical record. Another time, he found a basement room with medical lighting and the strong smell of formulane, a chemical used to preserve biological tissue. After an FBI raid found hidden storage units with human remains and videotapes with Rick's voice on them. Corey could no longer keep quiet, but he didn't say anything until he got a letter from his father that said, "You." The short words hit Corey like a bullet to the heart, taking away what little was left of his family ties and the faint hope that his father might feel sorry. But Rick wasn't sorry. He was just mad that Corey knew and scared that Corey would speak that night. Corey didn't sleep that night. The next morning he called Elijah, and the interview went on for 57 minutes with no cuts or effects, just a man facing his own truth. He talked about how he had once wanted to call the police. Corey had written a 200-page journal about all the strange things he had seen and heard over the years, complete with photos, notes, and even hair samples. The FBI now has this journal, which was one of the most important pieces of evidence used to convict Rick Harrison. What people found most shocking about the video wasn't just the shocking things Corey said, but also his face. He wasn't the happy big hose from TV, but a thin man with heavy eyes, and America realized at that moment that this wasn't just a criminal investigation, it was a cultural reckoning. A son had finally spoken out, not just to condemn his father, but to end a decades-long lie that millions of people had believed to be true. 3. The shocking confessions. Corey Harrison's nearly hour-long interview video started going around online, first as a short clip posted by an anonymous account on the public expected to hear about personal feelings like disappointment or grief from a son who saw his father fall. But what they got was much more than anything a TV script writer could have imagined. What Corey revealed wasn't speculation or emotional outcry. It was evidence, memories, and chillingly detailed descriptions of a criminal operation that was grown and carried out under the guise of reality television. The first time Corey thought his father was up to no good. Rick wasn't the man he thought he knew when he was 16 years old. It wasn't because Rick did anything specific. It was because of a random find. One night, after closing the shop, Corey came across a chained and locked filing cabinet in an old storage area. This was unusual because most of the store's documents were strewn around and not important enough to keep safe, so Corey used tools to break the lock. Inside were black and white photos of dead bodies, some of which were faded from age. Strangely staged scenes showed a woman lying on an old bed next to a grandfather clock, a man praying while dressed in military gear from the Civil War, and a little girl sitting among old toys with her eyes wide open. "I couldn't believe what I was seeing," Corey said. "These must be fake photos as part of some art preservation project my dad was working on." But Corey wasn't scared of the photos themselves. He was scared of how he felt when he closed the cabinet. "I felt like I had walked through a door and there was no going back after that. There were a lot of small things that most people would overlook, but when put together in Corey's journal, they painted a scary picture. For example, his father would often go outside in the middle of the night with a shovel and gloves on, saying he was treasure hunting, but the treasures never showed up. Rick had a private room in the shop that when Corey asked Rick about it, all he would say was, 'That's the archive.' Then there was the smell, a familiar one that Corey couldn't put his finger on but would never forget. Not the smell of decay, but the strong chemical smell of disinfectant, like a biological lab. The turning point, though, came when Corey accidentally opened Rick's suitcase in the trunk of his SUV and found new photographs, this time in high-resolution color, showing dead bodies in well-lit rooms. Each picture had Rick's unique handwriting on it. Acquisition zeros, Euro 4 shoulder joint adjustment 1997, non-ill skull integrity check ensure femur intact historical value. There was no longer any doubt that his father was doing something far beyond collecting or history. This was the preservation not of artifacts but of people. "I didn't call the police or tell anyone. I just shut it down, drove home, and didn't sleep that night," Corey said, his voice falling. "I knew if I said anything for years after, he lived as two different people, the happy, open son on TV and the silent witness who was always waiting for the worst to happen." His silence only ended when the FBI raided storage facilities connected to Rick Harrison. In warehouses owned by Harrison Asset Protection LLC, police found over 38 dead bodies, some preserved in industrial freezers and others on display in glass cases with tags that said Rick Harrison. Personal items like watches, necklaces, notebooks, and serial numbers were found. Some items belonged to missing people from decades ago, while others belonged to children who had not been identified. The items were arranged like specimens in an unholy museum collection. These undeniable discoveries led the FBI to look into family ties, but Corey was the first to come forward. He gave them a personal journal he had kept for 10 years, which was full of notes, sketches, and suspicions. The conjoined twins' bodies were later found in storage facility number 3, which investigators knew about long before it was made public. This proved something Corey had known for a long time, but had chosen to keep quiet until he could no longer. But Corey's confession wasn't just about giving information, it was also a spiritual reckoning. In the video, he said, "I'm not a victim, I'm someone who saw and knew and didn't act in time. I can never forgive myself for that." He turned down all offers for commercial interviews, refused to write a book, and refused any royalties that could be made from his story. He said, "I don't want to profit from pain, I just want the truth to be seen beyond the revelation of human remains." Corey also shared a scary detail about the secret room in Rick's basement. He had only been in it once, when he was 25, as part of a rite of passage his father had set up. The room was bathed in blue light. With the smell of chemicals and lots of light, Glass shelves lined the walls holding tagged specimens. In the middle, like in an autopsy room, a stainless steel table stood. Rick said, "This is where history waits its turn to be told." That statement stuck with Corey for years because he realized that Rick no longer saw the victims as people. To Rick, they were tools for rewriting history that only he could control. Psychologists call this behavior delusional archivism and obsessive need to collect and preserve human remains. FBI psychiatric experts said Rick had a severe case of this disorder along with extreme control issues and a strange interest in history. This is why he didn't just kill, he showed the victims as if honoring them while actually manipulating their memories. At the end of the interview, Corey wasn't answering right away when asked, "What would you say to your father if he was watching this video?" He just stared into the camera. Corey Harrison looked at the camera for a long time before saying, "I'm not your son anymore." That wasn't just a break in blood ties. It was a declaration of freedom, the end of a relationship between someone who had lived in fear and silence and someone who now chose to stand on the side of truth. Truth cannot change the past, but it can stop the future from repeating itself, and in that moment, Corey Harrison was no longer a shadow under his father's spotlight. He was the first person to show the dark side of an empire. What the FBI found during the investigation showed was the workings of an underground empire where history was twisted, human remains were sold for profit, and TV fame became a cover for illegal activity. Gold and silver porn shop. The famous Las Vegas porn shop was once a symbol of the American dream. It was a family business that grew from nothing, where people bought and sold antiques and learned about history, culture, and the arts. The value of memory on TV. It was portrayed as a living museum where people could trade memories for cash and smiles. But beneath those smiles was an underground machine, a sophisticated criminal operation run by Rick Harrison for more than 20 years, according to FBI investigation files and Interpol reports. This operation was split into 3 layers, each of which served as a protective shield and was hard to track. These layers were the storefront, the porn shop, the TV show, the social media accounts, charity events, and educational sponsorships. Rick carefully crafted his image as an intelligent and approachable businessman. He regularly spoke at artifact preservation conferences, gave speeches to the U.S. Congress on small business rights, and represented the Las Vegas community at many public events. But his constant public appearance made him almost impossible to suspect, since people think that people who are in the spotlight can't possibly be committing crimes in the background. This layer was made up of hidden assets, shell companies, and separate transactions. Through various channels, the FBI was able to identify at least 7 companies that Rick or his close friends were behind. These companies did not have any clear business activities, websites, or official employees, but they were registered with warehouses, international bank accounts, and transaction histories worth tens of millions of dollars every year. Rick used this network to transport, store, and trade special artifacts, including human remains. The deepest and most elusive level was Rick's network of clients, which was based on encrypted hard drives and handwritten notebooks. Rick held secret auctions for a group of very wealthy clients that included collectors, businessmen, and even some politicians. These events were never recorded and only had handwritten lists with coded symbols. A typical auction took place in a suburban Nevada mansion where Rick showed off special pieces that were presented as historical artifacts. Historical artifacts such as a human skull labeled Napoleonic era unverified, a mummified hand labeled Middle East pre-Islamic fragment, or even a glass vial containing coagulated blood marked Kennedy lineage subject K4. When tested, some of these objects were found to be real human remains with DNA matching missing persons cases reported in the US, Canada, and several Asian countries. Rick's use of his TV fame to make shipping activities seem legitimate by labeling shipments as when he brought valuable antiques or props for movies into the country. He avoided customs checks or got special treatment at some airports by making sponsorship deals with media outlets. Some former employees even said they had to sign historical confidentiality contracts that said they couldn't talk about non-traditional restoration activities. At first, many people thought these were just legal precautions, but later they realized they were actually a way for Harrison to get help from them. Between 2012 and 2017, finances showed that up to 20% of inventory marked as unknown origin was actually recorded in accounting system as internal archive, not for circulation. This meant that the items weren't sold or included in profit and loss statements, but were instead kept in a basement area called the archive. At one point, Corey tried to access the archive's ledger to look into long-term financial losses, but was blocked by Rick, who told him, "If you can open that vault, don't." From a systemic point of view, Rick had created an entire underground museum model where victims became exhibits and death was repackaged under layers of aesthetics and academic language. FBI records show that Rick even made fake profiles for the artifacts, complete with made-up backstories. For example, a man who was labeled a 19th-century Balkan warrior was later identified via DNA as a Texas engineer who went missing in 2003. For Rick, every human body was a story that could be sold. In modern criminal psychology, this is called a historical possession delusion, is a mental illness in which a person thinks they have the right to preserve, narrate, and control humanity's memory as they see fit. The danger lies in the fact that when someone has power and public admiration, they can legitimize almost anything. Rick Harrison, with 500 episodes, over 80 million monthly viewers, and tens of millions of dollars in sales, had done just that. A former FBI agent who worked on the case carefully compared Rick's empire to a museum of hell. Every shelf was neatly arranged and carefully chosen, but each one held a secret horror. Even scarier, it was an empire built on public trust. In a meeting with investigators, Corey said something that silenced the room. "We didn't kill anyone, but we sold tickets to watch." It was not just a confession of a single crime, but of a society that had unknowingly supported it. From the secret auction invitations and carefully packaged specimens to the surveillance cameras, Rick set up to record how people reacted when they saw the show. Every part of the bodies revealed a terrifying truth. This wasn't an accident. It was a carefully planned machine that had been used to make money off of death for years. Gold and Silver Pornhop wasn't a store. It was a warehouse where human remains were kept until they were ready to be shown. 5. Acceptance and repentance. There are many stories of people who came forward to expose the crimes of their loved ones, but few are as complicated and painful as Corey Harrison's. He wasn't an outsider who found wrongdoing and chose to tell the truth. He was as part of the story. He grew up in that house and worked in the store that would later be known as the center of organized crime. Most importantly, he was the son of the man who ran the network and taught him how to negotiate, appraise, and love history. That's what makes Corey's confession not only a revelation but also a change for him and for everyone watching on TV. Corey was known as Big Hose, and he was Rick's heir, right-hand man in all deals, and he was the son who occasionally disagreed with his father but never turned away, and over hundreds of episodes. No one ever thought that this man was living between two worlds, one of public glitz and another of darkness that slowly consumed him. Corey said in an interview, "It wasn't like in movies where you open a door and see everything. For me, it was a series of small things that happened over the course of my youth. From the first photograph to the exposed suitcase to the first time he saw the basement. The more he tried to hide it, the clearer it became, and it was this hesitancy, not speaking, not acting, not acknowledging, that left Corey carrying a burden he could only name years later. Silence can kill indirectly but surely, and in some ways Corey was also a victim of long-term mental manipulation. Rick Harrison wasn't a violent or authoritarian father, but his son taught him and instilled in him a love for history, antiques, and preserving what was disappearing. In Corey's mind, his father was trustworthy and made him the person he was. He always said, "We're not just buying and selling, we're preserving history." Corey remembered, "I used to believe that I was proud of it until I realized what we were preserving wasn't history but distortion." This realization didn't happen overnight. It was the accumulation of thousands of moments. Corey tried to ignore the way his father left the house at 3:30 a.m., the strange meetings with clients whose deals were never recorded in the books, the objects hidden deep in the warehouse that no one else had seen, and the change in Rick's eyes, which Corey described as the look of someone who stopped seeing people as people. Next came repentance, which was the most terrifying stage, and Corey's interview video explained why it was so powerful. "I didn't kill anyone. I didn't do anything wrong. I saw the signs and didn't say anything. I had many chances to speak up but didn't. Maybe if I had spoken up sooner, someone wouldn't have disappeared or become just a number in my dad's storage records. That wasn't easy to admit." Psychologists call it parallel shame, a state in which a person feels both betrayed and guilty for failing to stop the harm. For Corey, it was a cycle that lasted for years. He doubted, he feared, he stayed silent, and then he doubted again. This cycle created a new mental wound, and when the truth came out, it turned into an emotional storm that couldn't be stopped. That's why Corey's public confession wasn't just an act of cooperation with the FBI. It was a step toward healing. In the months after the interview, Corey turned down all offers from the media, especially for post-scandal TV shows and ways to make money off of his story. Instead, he spent his time working with the investigation team, giving them copies of his personal journals and cross-referencing pictures, details about the underground storage rooms, and even helped experts identify some of the artifacts Rick had said were unidentifiable. On top of that, Corey set up a fund to help families of the victims who had lost loved ones during Rick's years of silence. The fund isn't named after Harrison. It's named after Ava, the first woman whose name and likeness Corey thought his father had killed after seeing her body preserved in a glass case in 2004. "I can't bring them back, but I can help their families," Corey said. To make sure that what's left isn't forgotten, many people watched the conversation again and again, especially the part where Elijah Rodas, the interviewer, asked Corey, "Do you think your father regrets it?" Corey didn't answer right away. He looked at the ground and then said, "No, he doesn't think he did anything wrong. He thinks he was doing the right thing. He once told me, 'We don't kill, we preserve.'" That was the clearest example of Rick Harrison's crazy beliefs, which is why Corey cut ties with him. If he truly believes what he's doing is right, then I can't save him, but I can save others from being deceived by it. Corey didn't apologize to ask for forgiveness. He did it because he needed to, not just for himself, but for everyone who used to believe in porn stars, who believed in Rick Harrison. "I don't want to be a hero or a survivor. I just want to be known as someone who saw and finally spoke out against the sick fall of a legacy." No one could have predicted that a TV show about antiques with funny negotiations and simple historical stories would become the center of one of the worst cultural and legal scandals in American television history. But things changed when the dark secrets behind porn stars were made public. Corey Harrison's confession led to an investigation that lasted more than a year. The news quickly spread like a tsunami, destroying everything Rick Harrison had worked hard to build over almost 20 years. The first and most immediate reaction came from the fan community. Millions of viewers who had once thought of porn stars as part of their family routine and watched old episodes to unwind at the end of the day felt betrayed. Online forums like Reddit, Facebook, and Twitter were full of angry and disappointed posts. Many people were shocked and upset because they remembered watching the show as a way to relax or as a way for a father and son to bond over history. But now they remembered the horrifying thought that behind the smiles on screen were bodies, blood, and unimaginable secrets. One post on the subreddit Ash Porn Stars, once the most active fan community with over 200,000 members, received more than 50,000 upvotes within 24 hours. I once took my son to the shop to meet Rick. Now I just want to erase that memory. Another member wrote, we didn't just lose a show, we lost faith in something we thought was harmless. The anger wasn't just on the internet. In Las Vegas, just 48 hours after Corey's video was leaked, groups of fans started gathering outside the gold and silver pawn shop to protest. They carried banners, photos of missing people, and even items they had bought from the shop before that were now being burned. An older woman holding a picture of Rick with her granddaughter from 2012 broke down in tears when talking to reporters. I thought he was man of the people. Turns out he's a monster with a smile, she said. The anger also spread to the people who made the shows. The History Channel, which was the official broadcaster of porn stars, immediately pulled the whole thing from its airing system and digital platforms like Hulu, Amazon Prime, and YouTube. In a rushed press release, the channel said, "We are shocked, and because people are so shocked by what was revealed, all content related to Rick Harrison will be reviewed and removed to protect the public from more harm." However, this response wasn't enough to stop the anger. A group of viewers filed a class action lawsuit in federal court, accusing the History Channel of failing to properly monitor content and helping to normalize criminal behavior by creating a positive image for Rick Harrison. This was the first time in modern television history that this had happened, that a public figure wasn't fired for making inappropriate comments or having questionable morals, but for high-level crimes of unimaginable brutality. The scandal was covered in great detail by talk shows, social analysis programs, and podcasts. Some hosts even apologized publicly for having worked with or praised Rick in the past. The effects were felt beyond the borders of the United States, with the Smithsonian Institution, UNESCO, and Rick Harrison was investigated by Interpol for possible involvement in smuggling artifacts across international borders, which is against the Hague Convention on the Protection of Cultural Property in Armed Conflict. Artifacts found in storage, such as ancient Sumerian stone tablets, Egyptian burial jars, and bone fragments inscribed with ancient Chinese characters, were thought to have been stolen from museums and archaeological sites in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe. An UNESCO official called the case. At the center of this storm was Corey Harrison, who had been a person of suspicion but became a lighthouse for viewers looking for justice and the truth. No one could heal the wounds that Rick's crimes had left on millions of people, but Corey's decision to speak out was seen as a turning point. On many forums, people called him the truth bringer because he had the courage to admit his mistakes and act while there was still time. The porn star's case is now used as an example in media workshops and classes to show the bad side of fame and how public personas can be used to hide the truth. This has led to new questions. Are we too trusting of what we see on TV? How many warning signs have we ignored in search of entertainment? And would the truth have come to light if Corey hadn't spoken out? Rick Harrison's legacy, once a monument of reality TV, is now nothing but rubble, but there is one important thing that can be found among the rubble. In a world where reality and fiction are often hard to tell apart, the bravery of a son who broke the silence has become a symbol of hope. The truth can't stay buried forever, no matter how well it's hidden by carefully scripted TV shows, fake laughs, and fake emotions. In the end, darkness always finds its way to the surface. Corey Harrison, the son who used to seem like nothing more than a shadow next to his father, became the spark for this awakening. He risked his reputation while breaking the silence and revealing an empire based on lies, control, and crime. Corey doesn't want to be forgiven or called a hero. He has done the most important thing in a world where truth is often twisted. He dared to name the monster even though it looked like his father. By doing this, he woke up millions of people from their delusion. If there is any value left in the ruins of this legacy, it is this lesson. Sometimes we have to protect history must be brave enough to face its darkest chapters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on alerts to get the latest news on this shocking case. The truth never sleeps.